This, for example, this sake that I'm drinking, this is hard. Sorry, I'm working with 2 monitors and like a camera somewhere else. This sake is like really pervasive around the Boston area. And it's 19% ABV. It's 200 ml can. They recently put cans in English, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
And
Great.
so, yeah, these are 200 mils, so 6.3 ounces at 19 ABV. So this is pretty typical for American sake, but like 15 to 18 is generally what we work in. Yeah. If you go above 18, from a brewer's perspective, I found that it was really hard to maintain that much glucose so that the ethanol kind of balances out. So unlike beer, there's no like hops or anything to offer as a counterpoint to alcohol and sweetness. And so you've really got sweetness, which is glucose, and then acid and alcohol, and you're trying to kind of juggle all those things and balance them.
Yeah, that acid's kind of like a hop bittering charge, right? From a
yeah. So the acid is higher than beer, but way lower than something like wine. So wine has, so sake has 1/10 of the acidity of wine. So it's very hard to sell sake to wine drinkers because they've blown out their palate with all this acid content. And then when they try sake, it's got 1/10 of the acid. They're like, it doesn't really taste like anything, And so it's much easier to sell sake to beer drinkers, which is my experience. Selling sake that I made myself is that 95% of our accounts were beer heavy accounts. Like Craft Beer Cellar was probably my best retailer.
Yep, the ladies.
Dude, the mothership in Belmont, we moved like a case of sake a week. Yeah.
Suzanne was a fan. That helps. If Kate and Suzanne are fans, they help push it along.
Yeah, man, I was really surprised. It was really great. And then I started opening up some other stores like Dion's and Gordon's would sell a lot. But we were right down the street from Gordon's. So Gordon's sold a case a week just by telling people we were down the street. That was really their selling point. They could have given crap what was in the bottle, But,
all right, Mark, let's open up. What do you want to do first?
Yeah,
well, sorry, I mean, does the order look good to you?
Yeah, I would recommend that you drink the Dasai 39 last.
Oh, okay.
Because compared to the other ones, it is like far and away the better sake. Right? So you're the first 3 sake, the 2 Tozais and the Momokawa are like down here, and then you got to make a huge jump to get to the Dasai 39.
Okay.
Yeah, we were originally shooting for the Dasai 50, which is still also
that's
very
like
good.
Their standard.
Yeah.
So for
39 seems to be easier to find now.
Yeah, that's really interesting, but I'll take that as just a happy accident.
All right. Well, either way, we should start with the Living Jewel then, huh?
Yeah, Tozai Living Jewel, which is a Junmai sake.
And you want to drink out of something like this?
I would drink out of something like that. A lot of people think you gotta drink out of like a little thimble-sized cup. You want to drink out of like a real glass. I use a Belgian beer glass or a whiskey glass. Anything that narrows at the top to sort of focus the aroma. Exactly, Pete. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's a 5-ounce Anchor Hocking beer taster glass. Awesome choice. Yeah, I'm actually, just because I'm not doing sensory analysis, I'm drinking out of this cup my friend made. Just because it's from my friend. But normally I would drink out something like Doug's drinking out of. But without a stem, because I abhor stemware. I don't know why. Just a thing I don't like.
Sake in general, you're not going to get as much aroma as you will from a beer, right?
I mean, I think you get just as much aroma as you would from a beer. They're both grain-based fermentation, so
Hi guys.
1,200 to 1,400 active flavor and aroma compounds, give or take. So yeah, it's really something like Tozai. You won't get as much aroma out of as you'll see when you get to Dasai 39. This will be a big payoff for you guys, but. I don't actually have any Tozai in my market, so You're gonna just have to tell me what you taste, because
Oh, that's right. I'm not doing my temperature check.
that's all right. I haven't had it in quite a long time. Should be cold-ish.
No, I'm good. 47.
I'm reading at 50 right now.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Sakes like these modern sakes, in the United States, you want to drink cold to cool. This one I'm actually drinking on the rocks because it's 19% ABV and it's kind of nice on the rocks. But and then Doug, you were drinking the same brewery makes Perfect Snow.
Okay.
And you were drinking that, which is super good. But that's the best on the rocks.
Yeah.
Because it's 21% ABV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could feel and smell the alcohol in that one for sure.
Yeah, so
Smell it here too a little bit.
yeah, it's been a while since I had Tozai, but generally sake, like good sake, you don't smell a lot of the ethanol. It's a lot of fruit up front. Fruit and rice. You definitely get like a grain-like kind of rice thing going on. You might get a number of different fruits. Tozai, I think, is pretty subdued. It's like usually like kind of peach and white grape and that kind of thing.
I feel like I'm getting some pear maybe, but not
Yeah.
definitely not getting banana or lemon. I'm just looking at the tasting notes here.
Oh yeah, those tasting.
I know grain to
notes are-
salt, but still.
Right. Those tasting. If you were in the brewery drinking out of the tank, maybe. But I don't know the date on that bottle. Who has the bottle? Oh, you all have the bottles. There are dates. There are definitely dates on there.
Yeah, all mine are within a year. I checked that.
That's not bad. So brewing, the dating goes by brewing years. So Tozai is a pretty big brewery. Is it in English dating?
This says 7/18, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that would be July 2018.
Mine's okay. This is mine. That's right. This is the oldest one. This is a year and 2 months.
Yeah.
It's 19.
So is that the package date? You probably
That's
can't
the
see it. It says
package date.
6/19. So that's the package date.
Package date, correct.
Okay, so this is just almost a year old.
Yeah. So generally, a big brewery like Tozai, they will brew the sake and then press the sake and then age that for 6 months and then package it and pasteurize it and ship it all over the world. So
Does that mean that was packaged 6/9 or that was brewed 6/9?
yeah, the date on the bottle is packaging. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
So it
the
was
sake
already aged in stainless for 6 months before that.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So they don't. Yeah. Let's say stainless. But yeah, it's an enameled steel tank. It's like a giant bathtub.
Okay.
Yeah, generally commercial sake, that's what you're dealing with. So the brewing process is much longer than beer. And then commercial sake is, so the interesting thing about sake, the unique thing about the fermentation, as Mark could tell you, is that when you're done making sake and you've got, let's say 16% ABV sake, all of the physical material is still in the tank. So you've got all the rice, which is now broken down. You've got all the koji you put in, water, yeast, everything is still in there. So then you have to press this kind of mash almost to get finished sake out the other end. So you're kind of looking at like an alcoholic oatmeal and pressing that to get the clear sake out the other end.
Mm-hmm. And I've kept the oatmeal though, and I've been making amazake from time to time with it, and that's
Yeah,
great stuff.
you can actually make amazake in a rice cooker. If you
I saw an article on that. Yeah, I figured, well, hell, I've got this stuff. And I certainly swore a whole lot of the process of making it, especially
yeah,
trying
that's
to
how I do it. You just
wrench
put
the damn stuff out of the brew bag.
put like a wooden spoon in between the lid of your rice cooker so it doesn't close all the way, and then you put it on the keep warm setting. So you just, prop the top open. Yeah. Depending on what kind of rice cooker you have. Does anybody hate this sake? Would be my first question.
No,
No? Huh?
not at all.
No, not at all. Is it good?
Well,
It's a little, I don't know, there's a little boozy quality to it. I mean, I can tell it's, it's less refined than others. I haven't had this one in a long time.
Yeah.
You know, that's a, you know, I certainly wouldn't turn it down. I'd never call this a drain pour, but
Right.
but it
Right.
it's not pushing my buttons of like, this is why I enjoy drinking sake.
Yeah. I recently had a drain pour of beer, and it was a terrible feeling.
Hoppy beer, probably.
I pulled the beer out of my beer cellar, and we were like, "No way, dude!" It was really bad. Just
Can I ask a question about aging? Like, so this bottle that we got is a full year older than the bottle that Matt has, for instance.
Yeah.
Is there a time at which it's too late? Or do they age well for a long time? Or does it depend on whether it's...
Yeah, generally you don't want to age sake. You don't generally want to age sake. So a sake like that is meant to be just consumed right away. After it leaves the brewery, I should say. Sake doesn't go bad like any other alcoholic beverage, but what happens is fresh sake, like of the style that we're drinking today, fresh sake has all of this like fruit flavor and aroma and all this complexity, sometimes like flowery, and there's a lot of nose and stuff because that's like the modern goal for sake. And then as it ages, a lot of that knocks off and you get more of like rice character. Chestnut is a big, we don't eat a lot of fresh chestnuts in the United States, but chestnut, this kind of nuttiness and kind of warm pastry nuttiness kind of is a real common thing because in making sake, you actually use a mold. So you can't malt rice that's been milled down to 60% or 50% or whatever. In Asia, they developed a technology to use this other microorganism that's a mold that excretes alpha amylase and breaks down the rice into sugar. So you use a mold anyways. A lot of those characters you don't really detect in fresh sake or fruitier sakes, but as they age, you get more and more of that. And it's very pleasant if you're expecting it, right? If you're expecting some sort of, appley, peachy, kind of fresh, juicy thing, and you get chestnuts and rice, you're like, I don't know. But if you're expecting it, it's pretty awesome. Yeah. So sake, as it ages, goes through a process called non-oxidative browning. I don't actually know. That's the best translation I got for you. But so it's not exposed to air like in this can, but browning occurs. So the sake will get darker and darker and darker with age. Yeah. And then get more chestnutty. With extreme age, I actually had one of these cans recently that was 12 years old. And it was like almost like sherry notes or like a really old Belgian double, something like that, like leather, tobacco, sherry, that kind of thing. It was pretty awesome. And you can buy sake like that too. You can buy aged sake, which is pretty cool.
Are we ready to move to the next one? What was the next one? All right, the Momokawa.
I'm drinking the same thing. Momokawa is arguably well, I guess not. Anyways, Momokawa is the first American-owned sake brewery since the 1980s.
This is out of Oregon?
Yeah, they're in Forest Grove, Oregon. They make pretty simple sake. They use California-grown rice, which is like an eating rice, basically, called Calrose.
Calrose?
Very cheap Calrose rice. You can buy it in the store. They mill it down to 62%-ish. So the milling rate is generally in Japan how they grade sake. So sake rice, unlike eating rice, is grown so that all of the starches are concentrated at the center of the grain. So the best way to think about it is if you could cut a grain of rice in half the long way, it would look like a fried egg. So the yolk would be all the starches concentrated in the center. And then the white of the egg would be some starches, but a lot of fats and proteins. And so what you can do is you can mill that away by milling the outside of the grain to the center. You can mill a lot of that away. So you get, now your pile of rice is more pure starch, which is what you want to ferment, right? You want to convert that starch into sugar, and you want to leave the proteins and fats away. So in Japan, the only way they grade sake is by milling. So the further down you mill it, the more fats and proteins you're theoretically getting rid of, and then the more pure starch you have, and the cleaner the sake is. The more ethereal it ends up being, that kind of thing. At some point, if you want to think about it, that kernel of starch is X amount of the grain of rice. So at some point, the mill rate, you're also losing starch. But at that point, it's more of like brewery owners seeing who has the bigger dick. You know what I mean? There's a guy who makes a 7, so 93% of the grain has been milled away.
So earlier, before you came on, I was just wondering, what do they do with all the rice that's milled away, whatever that rice dust is?
There's a huge market in Japan. They sell rice. It's high-end rice flour. They sell it to confectioner makers, like people who make like traditional sweets. Some of it goes to the cosmetic industry. Some of it goes to like dog food. Like there's a full range of what to do with it. But yeah, so at a certain point, if we're being scientific about it, the mill rate you get to when you go, all right, at this point you're milling away starch, but it's just to see who can get lower and whatever. For example, dasai, so the lowest grade sake they make is 50, which is the highest grade sake in Japan. Daiginjo is 50 and below, but they only make Daiginjo. So they make dasai 50, 39. They make a 23, and then they make something called Dasai Beyond, where they don't really disclose the milling rate. So more than likely 22.5 or something, because they make a 23. So who knows? But there are people in Japan who like, it's all PR. You know, it's like, it's just PR. It's just people who are like, now we make a 7, we mill away 93% of the rice. You know, it's just crazy, pants.
So you can buy pure, like powdered rice starch, I think. So if you had that, that's basically the center of the kernel, and you could brew the ultimate sake from this powdered shit.
So if you get a really cheap California mass-produced, like Japanese sake, like Gekkeikan would be the best example. I buy Gekkeikan to do experiments with. There you go, right there, boom. Largest sake brewer in the world. Dude, I buy it. So here's what I do. I buy 1.5 liter bottles of that. So put that in a glass with some ice and add like a half a lime that you squeeze in there and some green tea simple syrup. And it's boom, like an awesome cocktail. Like 5 ounces of sake, green tea simple syrup, and a half a lime and some ice. It's awesome. Right? Wow. And it's cost effective and it's delicious. Anyway, so what they do is they take rice and they grind it into grits, and then they pump it through a stainless steel tube from one building to another. And then inside the tube, they push the rice with superheated steam, like pressurized steam, and they cooks the rice in the pipe on the way to the brew house. The like grits, and then they dump that into a tank and add alpha amylase enzyme, some koji for flavor, and then yeast and stuff. That's basically what you're talking about, Matt, is like you can just take like rice starch powder, right? They're kind of doing that, right? They steam it en route in a pipe. You know, it's ridiculous. But you come out with that bottle. I buy a 1.5 liter bottle that's like $9.50 or something. Super cheap.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do people think of this one then?
Yeah, the Momokawa Diamond. Is that what you're Yep.
I'm getting a lot of peach and pear. A lot of this.
Probably more ricey would be my guess.
Doesn't have as much fruit as the first one.
Not as much what?
Doesn't have as much fruit like the pear, apple, peach thing going on as the first one did.
Right. It's not as complex at all.
I'm getting some like cantaloupe, maybe something a little bit more vegetable-y than fruity. Maybe that's what's sort of spanning into rice. There's a little bit of funk.
Very plain.
Yeah, their sake is, I don't consider very high quality sake, but they're better than Gekkeikan.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the reason I picked this one is, well, one, it's everywhere. Two, because it's made in America with American ingredients. I thought this is probably kind of similar to what we may end up making, depending on where we can source our ingredients.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
So that's why I figured.
They've been in business for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been to their place in Oregon.
Hmm?
You've been there?
They're in Oregon, right?
Yeah, they're in Forest Grove, Oregon. It's like, I don't know,
Homebrew
half hour
a
west
couple
of
years ago
Portland.
in Portland, and I did some wine touring and passed by and popped into Mamakawa.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great people.
Mhm. It was
Yeah.
a cool tasting room experience. I also went to, there's a tasting room in Berkeley. I forget the company.
Yeah, Takara, it's called.
Yeah. And they had like a whole like museum set up
Yeah.
for education and things like that.
They're Japanese. That's Japanese money. They
Yeah, exactly.
So there's 3 big Japanese brewers in California. There's Gekkeikan, as Pete was showing off, Ozeki, and Takara in Berkeley. And those are like 3 really big breweries out of Japan, and they have breweries in California.
Are they
There used to
brewing
be one
for
in Colorado, but
the
I closed.
domestic audience in California? Are they only brewing for the U.S. or is
Right,
that
they're
export?
not. No, nothing. None of that shit's going to Japan. Yeah. Matter of fact, it's the other way. So they brew sort of their core products. The Gekkeikan, their core products are 750 1.5 liter, and then they make an 18-liter bag in the box, which is their number one product. And same with Ozeki. Ozeki's number one product is 18-liter bag in the box. So that's when you go to a Japanese restaurant, like a rando Japanese restaurant, and you order like warm sake, and they just bring it out in a carafe, that's what you're getting. You're getting an 18-liter bag in the box that's plugged into the top of like a warming machine. And they just like, it's like a water cooler at work where you have a blue side and red side, and you pull the red side and it's hot water. It's exactly what it is. So they're just plug in, it comes all pre-plumbed with like the same connection as the bag in the box. Yeah. So I used to buy the bag in the boxes from Gordon's in Waltham because I used it to calibrate a piece of lab equipment. And they were, for me, price to consumer was $68 a box. So $68 for 18 liters of sake.
Whereas some of the bottles this size, as I'm sure you guys saw when you went to the store, were $68 for 300 milliliters of.
Yeah. The best thing about sake, as far as like a consumer's point of view, is you get what you pay for. There are no, like the wine world is extremely difficult to navigate for people because you can buy a $9 bottle of wine and it's way better than a $50 bottle of wine that you find. It just depends on what you buy. But with sake, there are no situations where you don't spend less and get better sake. It's very fairly priced across the board. Yeah. So these are $7 a can, $8 a can, something like that, depending on where you are. And so, but they're really good. All the cups and cans. So I was telling Doug, as a caveat to this whole conversation, the cups and cans are a better way to go because they move them in the U.S. It's lower price to entry. So like if you don't know about sake and you go into a store and you're like, oh, I could buy this $30 bottle or I could buy this can for $7, right? It's more consumers are going to buy this than spending $30. So they move them and they're always fresh and they're super high quality sake. So
the next one we do is we can just do all cans then and get into a different selection.
Yeah, I told Doug.
I'm Bill Rick. I don't have many choices, but
yeah. So I used to work kind of part-time while I was writing my business plan at Dion's. It's a family-owned chain of liquor stores. There's 2 in Waltham, 1 in Natick, 1 in Newton, that kind of thing. And so the one on River Street in Waltham and the one in Natick have the best sake selection in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Because I worked with them to curate their list. And so it's only cups and cans and Gekkeikan, but it's only cups and cans and they're all in the fridge. I don't allow them to put anything in the, on the shelf or whatever. It's all just fridge only. So keep it cold, drink it cold. And there's like a wide range, unfiltered, filtered, junmai, some ginjos, that kind of thing. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Momakawa? A little bit simpler, right? A little bit.
Yeah, much.
I
was starting to get that cantaloupe mark at the end too. As it's warming
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing an okay job. There's a big difference between using Calrose and using actual brewing rice, which is now available in the U.S. So
Yeah, the Calrose, the new place in New York, he said he uses Calrose too. So it seems like a lot of
Brooklyn.
the second place that opened in New York, not
Yeah,
Kura.
Kato-san.
Yeah.
Kato Sake Works, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're all using Calrose, man. So our brewery was the only one to say we're only going to use Yamada Nishiki, which is the most sought after rice in the world. So it's available. Most of the breweries that I consult with now, I'm building a brewery in New Orleans, and I built out a brew pub in Pennsylvania. So I've got them just for cost efficiency doing Yamada Nishiki only for the koji part, and then Calrose for everything else. It makes a better sake, but if it was my money, I'd go Calrose. I'd go Yamada Nishiki only. It just makes better sake. It's more expensive.
Yeah, and that's the only place that has that is the Minnesota rice and milling place.
You can get it from California. So
Okay.
Minnesota will mill Yamada Nishiki, and also Valley Select in California. They have California grown Yamada Nishiki. The stuff that I order from Minnesota comes from Arkansas. So it's grown in Arkansas. Arkansas grows more rice than every other state in the U.S. combined. So people think like California is the rice epicenter of the United States. It is by far Arkansas. So there's a guy in Arkansas who's been growing Yamada Nishiki for like 5 years, and which is literally the best sake rice. And then they started doing it in California. And then he's also going to release a second sake rice called Omachi pretty soon this season, I think.
What makes that a better rice? You talked about the structure of the grain and having the starch concentrated to the center, and that's really the difference, is just sort of how well those materials are segregated, or does it have to do with it?
So Yamada Nishiki is the grains are bigger, and then the core of starch is bigger, and then the grain is a little harder, so it holds up to polishing better. So that's what makes Yamada Nishiki like the sake brewing rice. But all of the other rices, are exactly the same. They're just real fat cores of pure starch. Omachi, and they all have different characters. So just like you would use two-row in a beer, and then you would add in some like accent grains like Munich and Vienna and wheat and whatever, acidulated, whatever you want. So with sake, you're not really blending a lot of rice types usually, except for cheaper sake, but the different rices definitely have different character. So Omachi tends to be a little better for like higher alcohol sake. Sake is a little earthier. And made with some different processes, some like funkier sakes. So everything we're having tonight is a modern sake. So the acidity in the sake comes from lactic acid. And those breweries are adding the lactic acid from a jug of lactic acid, which is what I did.
What are you looking for the pH to be at with the lactic acid?
It's the same as beer. By the end of fermentation, you're at like 4.1 or 4.2, something like that. It ends up being the same as beer, but in the early days, so a sake batch you build up in stages. You don't just huck everything into the tank and ferment it like beer. So the first day of brewing, you add about 25% of the ingredients. And then you kind of let that go for an extra day, and the yeast gets a running start. And then you add another 25, and now the tank is half full. And then the fourth day of brewing, but the third day of brewing, but the fourth day chronologically, because there's one day you don't do anything, you add 50% of the ingredients. So you kind of build it up in stages. And so in the early days, all that lactic acid that you add out of the jug, because you added that lactic acid on day one, ends up being a pretty good barrier for other microorganisms that would infect the sake, and allows the yeast to get a real head start. And then as you add successive ingredient loads, you dilute the acid down quite a bit. And then by the end of fermentation, it comes out being like a beer, like acidity-wise, But there are methods of making sake where you grow lactic acid first, then you brew. So a super traditional old school batch of sake like 100 years ago would be before 1920, which is when some guy at the Japanese Brewing Institute was like, oh, wait a minute, we're making lactic acid and I've got a jug of lactic acid on the shelf. So that was 1920. So before then, what they would do is they would make a little batch of sake. So they would make something about 7% of the overall grain bill. They would make that in a smaller tank, and they would bring it through like a very controlled sort of temperature phase for 2 weeks. And during that 2 weeks, they haven't added yeast. It's just koji, which breaks down the rice into sugar. They've added rice and they've added water, and that's it. So during that stage, you've got lactic acid bacteria that's on the rice and in the air, and that basically creates your own lactic acid. You're just pickling the rice, for lack of a better term, for about 2 weeks. And then at the end of that 2 week period, you're adding the yeast and cropping up the yeast for another 2 weeks. Then you can brew. And
I
then
like the jug
you do
method.
a batch. Huh?
I like the jug method.
Yeah, me too. Believe me too. I like both, actually. So those two styles, they're called Yamahai or Kimoto. They're related, but the original method is called Kimoto, and they used to use these long poles and like beat the crap out of the rice to like pulverize it. And then somebody was like, if we don't pulverize it, it basically comes out the same. And so then they created Yamahai, which means don't use the pole, basically. And then that comes out the same. But it takes a month just to do the yeast starter, and then you ferment the sake.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then fermentation for sake is 3 to 4 weeks, probably. Depends on the sake. Let's say 3 to 5 weeks of fermentation after the 1 month yeast starter process. Then you do 3 to 5 weeks of fermentation, depending on what you're doing. And then there's like a couple weeks of processing on the back end. So for me, when I was making commercial sake that I added lactic acid to a jug, our unfiltered sake was about 7 weeks grain to glass. And then the filtered stuff was like 9 weeks grain to glass. Yeah. So like literally in a store fridge, probably 9 weeks. So a lot longer than beer.
Yep.
Yeah, longer than a lager.
Yeah. What's your third sake?
So I guess we'll fast forward to the Nagori Tozai.
Yeah, you gotta shake that up, man.
Yeah, make sure everybody. If it doesn't look all milky.
Yep. Shake it, make it homogeneous. Yep. I was hanging out with who was I hanging out with? Might have been Jamie McGee back in the day, and he was drinking that, pouring it off the top. It was cracking me up.
Decanting it.
Yeah, he was like decanting it. And I was like, dude, what are you doing?
I think I did the same thing with the first one I had.
Oh, saving the chunks for last. Yeah, that's like the worm in the bottle of tequila. They just put a bunch of sludge
Well,
in.
I tell you, Doug and I were talking about the perfect snow. You can't decant that. There's nothing. It's as close to drinking out of the tank as you can get.
Oh, wow.
It's got like whole chunks of rice in it. There's no decanting.
Wow. The same acidity and same sweetness as the other Tozai, but different rice.
Yep.
Probably, I mean, no idea what the yeast is on this. So some similarities, some differences.
Yeah, that's my problem with unfiltered sake. Most unfiltered sake in the U.S. is that I really feel that you have to brew a very different sake to make an unfiltered sake. It should be, to me, it should be sweeter and more acidic. But yeah, there's a lot going on in there.
Well, I find that interesting. I mean, it's the same sweetness and acidity, sort of as measured by instruments, but because there's so much other stuff going on in there,
yeah, not measured by your palate.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I find more interesting about playing with this, how they play off each other.
Yeah.
That actually kind of want to bring the other one out just to.
Yeah, I mean, unfiltered sakes are generally a little sweeter because you have to give some sort of body to support all that rice in there, you know? Kind of. But yeah.
It's mouth coating. It's kind of pulpy.
Yeah. Yeah, people, you know what's really funny that I never, seems to be a universal thing is a lot of people get vanilla and coconut in those sake. And there's
I should too, but I don't.
Yeah, that's okay. There's something about the rice particulate that some people's minds jump to coconut and vanilla. I don't know.
Probably people who like drinking Malibu.
Right.
Ugh.
Right. Yeah.
Pina colada.
Yeah. Nigoris are also very good on the rocks. Helps kind of break up that viscosity a little bit, but
It's about 50.
Depends. That one might not be a big enough socket. But yeah.
1019, relatively fresh. Mine's from October, so
Nice.
I guess relatively.
Yeah, Tozai does pretty well. They have a super effective sales force. They are imported and distributed by Vine Connections, which is kind of a small house that deals with only sake and Argentinian wines, I think. It's like they've really kind of picked their lanes. And they have a really effective sales force. And they've hired the right people. So they move a good amount of sake. It's also extremely fairly priced. Like, I don't remember what it's like a 720s, like, I don't know, $20 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, 375s are all around $10 each.
Yeah, it's not bad, right? I mean, 15 or 16% ABV. Yeah. That's the hardest thing to get over with selling sake, is people sometimes make value judgments based on sort of package size or whatever. But you got to remember the ABV is like pretty high, although it's really drinkable for its ABV, right? I mean, if we were all sitting around right now drinking 16% barley wines, right, it'd be a little different.
It'd be done already.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same ethanol, right? But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, there's something about sake it's way more drinkable at 18% or 16%. Yeah.
So the Nigori, does that cut the bitterness a bit too? Or the acidity? Yeah,
the acidity, my Nigori is a little more acidic, but I brew it that way on purpose. But my problem with Nigori, generally, unless I make it, is that you've got all this thick sort of mouthfeel, and you've got some good flavors, but there's nowhere to go, right? It's a little, I don't know. I don't know what that Tozai is like, but sometimes it's like drinking white paint. So it's just like, it's coating, and it's got some flavor, but there's like nowhere to go. And so from a brewer's perspective, my Nigori, I brew it with higher acid so that you get a ton of sweetness up front and all that mouthfeel, all that sort of mouth coating unfilteredness. And then there's some acid that comes in at the back. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a juxtaposition, somewhere to go. But I feel the ice kind of does that too, if you put it on the rocks. I don't know.
Yeah, normally I don't typically drink that many Nigoris, but I wanted to make sure we included one in our first run here. I mean, it usually gets positioned as like the dessert wine of sakes, which is...
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's just unfiltered sake. Yeah. America drinks more Nigori sake than the Japanese do. So really? It's a huge style here. Yeah. Yeah. At my previous brewery and my next brewery, definitely the first two styles in the market are like a filtered, really clean, fruity, whatever, and then a Nigori sake is the first two things out of the door. You got to make a Nigori sake in the U.S., I think.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty good. It kills your glass, but it's pretty good.
I was like, we got to rinse before we go to the good stuff.
Yeah, man. It's hard to do like a sake tasting sometimes you want to put the nigori in the middle because of where it falls for sweetness or alcohol, or whatever. But you always have to put it at the end if you're doing like a tasting with people or
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was the one thing I knew right away when Doug asked me about the order. I said, well, the nigori at the end, let me think about the rest. For that, for that reason.
Yeah, really, you got to get rid of these 3 sake, and then Dasai 39 will be a different animal.
Well, that'll be good. I mean, one of the I'd been drinking sake for probably about 5 years before I went to the first. Well, it wasn't the first. It was, I think, the 5th annual sake festival out in San Francisco that Bo Timken organizes.
Yeah, Sake Day.
Yeah, the sake. So I went to that in 2010, I think, and to just be going through a room sampling like premium sake after premium sake after premium sake.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
I'll be the first one to tell you, if you're interested at all in sake, the Joy of Sake in Manhattan is a must go.
Okay.
It's like once a year. It has switched from the fall to the summer because of COVID-19. It's now back in the fall this year. So I think it's October maybe this year. It'll be in Manhattan. It's, I don't know, 400 sake in a room, self-pour.
Oh my goodness.
You have like a eyedropper situation, like a pipette.
Okay.
In a container of sake, but it's all self-administer, and you can bring your own glassware.
Wow.
So I usually bring some kind of
the liter mug.
Yeah, bring my own glass. They won't let you go crazy. They won't let you like pick up a bottle and pour it or anything. There's a cup with a giant pipette in it. You know what? They sell those little 2-ounce keg cups. They sell 2-ounce red keg cups like that, like solo cups.
Yeah.
Grab one of those and just walk around with like a solo cup. Dude, people will give you props for that. It's very funny. I usually bring, you know what I do is I go to like Goodwill or Savers or something. And for 50 cents, I buy some cool glass from somebody's house or something. You know what I mean? I buy some, like, just go to Goodwill and you get like a 50-cent cool glass. And then at the end of the night, so I go and you drink sake for 3.5 hours. And then we always go out to dinner. So I just leave the glass on the table. I'm not going to walk around Manhattan with a glass.
Yeah.
So I just go.
The sake day thing, they give you a swag bag, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's like a little, they give you a cup and everything else, and so it doesn't measure your pours out when you go around there.
So in Manhattan, the coolest thing, they will give you a little plastic thing, but they allow you to bring your own glassware, which I think is fun.
That sounds fun.
And the people get into it. There's people who bring like serious like pottery cups and stuff, which is pretty cool. But I just don't want to carry that around Manhattan.
Can you guys talk about the size of that event? And, are there bras with, pretzel necklaces and all that kind of thing that you have to do with it? What's the vibe?
Yeah, for one, it's Manhattan, which is different. And then it's in a pretty nice space that's like like an event space. So it's an old factory in Chelsea that's got wooden floors. And so it's kind of a nice space. And it's on Friday night. So you get this like really crazy cross-section of people in suits who are coming from work, or women who are dressed up in like really nice dresses, to people who are wearing like jeans and a t-shirt. It's this weird cross-section of people, but it's Manhattan. So there's nobody with pretzel necklaces or like weird, and there's food. So it's one night only, 3.5 hours, 400 sake, give or take. And then they're all arranged on huge long tables, but around the periphery of the building, around the periphery of the space rather, are restaurants. There's usually about 14 to 18 restaurants from New York, and they're all just handing out free food. And then some of those tables around the periphery are also brewers or reps from Japan who fly in for the event and pour their own sake instead of having it on a table. So you go to them and they'll chat you up and, pour sake and stuff.
Yeah, the Sake Day one in San Francisco is more like the latter one. So the periphery there is all the distributors. So there's probably like 40 or 50 distributors, and then each distributor has 5 to 8 different sakes. And then in the middle of the room there's some food pairings. There's tasting stations with like the same sake at 3 different temperatures.
Oh, that's cool. Well, Bo is the
price. Guess the price of the bottle, so 3 bottles in black, and you taste them. And so there's some cool stuff like that. And the first year I went was in the It's in the Japanese Community Center. So just in a big old basketball court in the Japanese Community Center. It's pretty huge, but still, it was very much a community event, like really grassroots. Then when I went back for the 10th, it was in the Armory down in I can't remember the neighborhood where they shot parts of Star Wars. That was kind of cool. Right. The bigger space, so it's grown considerably. Not going to make it back for this year. I was hoping to make it every 5 years.
Bo he owns True Sake and
True Sake, yeah.
So it's America's first ever sake only retailer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a great little store, and I do recommend his book too. Good stuff book. In that. You know, I mean, in addition to, this is the Bible, Galtner's book.
Oh, that's the Confidential, yeah.
Yeah, so that's got some stuff in it. I mean, that's the one you see his name cited probably more than anybody else on any other website. So if you see it on a website, it probably came from here or Ald's book.
I'm not a big fan of that.
What's that?
I'm not a big fan of that book.
It's so hard. The community is so much smaller than for homebrewers. There's not a lot to choose from.
There's not a lot going on. Sorry, I'm fluent in Japanese, so I don't really have a lot of the issues that you're gonna have. But there's a book. Wait, let me see if I have it. It might be upstairs. Hold on.
We can use this as a rinse break for our Nigori glasses.
So if you really were going to learn about brewing sake, I recommend this book. Sorry, that's backwards? Or is that just backwards?
That's right. It's just backwards for you, yeah.
Japanese sake.
It's called Nihonshu, and it's by this guy who's French. Wait, I see it backwards, but do you see it backwards?
No, we see frontwards, yeah.
Weird. If you're going to learn about brewing sake, this is actually a really good book. So this is a French guy who goes to Japan to study sake, but he's from a winemaking family. So he knows a lot about, working in a brewery and winery or whatever. And so this is actually a pretty good book.
Oh, cool.
And then you could just contact me for if you want, you can just contact me for making sake at home to trim some of that down. I don't know. Will Ald's a nice guy, but he basically just regurgitated an old book by what's his face? The guy who wrote the Lager book. God, sorry, old.
From Vermont, that guy.
No, what the fuck was that guy's name? I don't have it. It's geez.
Your website has a lot of stuff for homebrewers just to jump in. So
my website, Boston Sake.
Boston Sake, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't posted to it in a very long time, but I left it up because a ton of people seem to like it. God damn, sorry, I don't know why I can't remember that guy's name. So there's a book about making sake in Japan. Making sake at home here, but it's not very good. So there's Will's book, which is, I guess, as good as you're gonna get if you don't dig too deeply. Anyways, I can't remember the guy's name. There's also a book. There's also a paper online and stuff, but I would recommend just reading this Nihonshu book.
All right.
Which is really great. And then just contacting me for how to brew sake at home. Because the problem is some people look at how you brew sake in a brewery in Japan and then translate that to brewing at home. They do the exact same steps, and you really don't have to do it. You can streamline it quite a bit because you're only making 20 liters of sake.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're making a 5 to 7 gallon bucket. That's it. So you can really streamline that commercial process down quite a bit.
They do a lot of praying there, right? After each step too.
Oh yeah, right. You got to do it naked or whatever. No, it's but there's also people who a lot of the books and kits and stuff are telling you use champagne yeast and all this other crap. It's I don't know.
That's what I saw. So much inconsistency out there that I kind of had to see where the central tendency happened to be.
Yeah, the whole 3-step fermentation process that I was talking to you about. I wouldn't do that in a 20-liter bucket. It's not really necessary. You know, because your first edition will be like 2 cups of rice. It'll be ridiculous. And so you can streamline that quite a bit. There's actually a video on bostonsake.com about doing that, about kind of streamlining it. When I worked at Dovetail Sake, we did 2 years of R&D. And so I probably made, I don't know, 40 to 50 buckets of sake as like R&D batches, like homebrew buckets. And after a while, I just was like, all right, I just added 50% of the ingredients on the first day, waited a day, added the second 50, and it was indistinguishable. Like I couldn't tell the difference at all, even analytically. Like we had a, you know, $6,000 machine to measure alcohol and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't tell the difference, like analytically, taste-wise, nothing. So then I started doing them that way. I started just adding 50%, waiting a day, adding the second 50%, fermenting it. You're still going to need a temperature-controlled fridge either way you slice it. But yeah, you still need temperature control. Sake is a cold fermentation. So good sake, like the Dasai that you guys should be cracking open right now, is not fermented anywhere really above 12 C. So 48 Fahrenheit, something like that. That's the highest it gets to. And the lowest. Huh?
It's a lager.
It's cooler than a lager.
It's a lager. Totally a lager. Yep. It's a lager. So you start at probably 6.5 C and you slowly raise it to 12 C and then you ferment it for 12 C for like 4 days. And then you just start bringing it down slowly. Sometimes it's literally like 1 degree a day change. Oh, so Dasai.
What's up with this foil thing?
Yeah, it's a foil-backed vinyl cap. Yeah, it's a very Japanese thing. They have the metal part you got to take off first, right? Because that'll obviously fall out. But yeah.
I just wondered if it was silver, like an antimicrobial version, or like, why do you do it?
Hey, Matt, did you buy the carbonated one? No.
No. We actually have some of that just randomly that we picked up.
Yeah, I couldn't tell
this is 39.
They added that white sleeve on the neck.
I think it has a purple band too, or something like that.
Yeah. So see how Matt's has like a white sleeve on the neck. It was something he took off. They didn't have that back when I.
Yeah, mine had that too. But I saw this next to the one you're talking about, the sparkling one.
Yeah, that's a relatively
purple band.
Oh, the sparkling's nice. Yeah.
Is it?
So anyways, this is Dasai 39. So Dasai is the only brewery in Japan to say Daiginjo only and Yamada Nishiki only. So they only use Yamada Nishiki rice, the king of sake brewing rice, and they only make the highest level of sake called Daiginjo. So you're drinking their 39, which means that 39% of the rice is remaining and 61% of the rice has been milled away. Yep. And they use a blend of yeast. So they use 9 and 1801. So 9 yeast is like a lot of apple and peach and kind of real fruity notes. And then 1801 is basically licorice or fennel or anise.
Yeah.
It's ethyl caproate is the chemical. So that's kind of that was a real modern sake thing.
Is that different than 7?
Huh?
Is that different than 7?
Yeah, 9 and 7 are very different. Yeah.
I mean, then the one you said this is 9 and which other one?
Oh, 1801.
So 1801 is different than 7.
Yeah, 1801 is basically an aroma yeast and is used for ethyl caproate, which is licorice or white jelly beans or anise or fennel or whatever you want to call it. So
it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there. So ethyl caproate is that, and that's a real thing that people want out of modern sake. So Dasai blends 9 and 1801, so you get the fruity and the spicy kind of. Yeah.
The 9's supposed to have a lot more bitterness, right?
It's real soft, kind of ethereal almost. I mean, not quite ethereal, but yeah.
It's good.
And the O1s are the foamless yeasts, right? If I remember that correctly?
Yeah, O1 means foamless, right?
Okay.
So they genetically modified the outside of the yeast cell to have greater lubricity, so the bubbles don't stick to it. So You don't get bubbles that build up on themselves and make like clusters of bubbles in the fermentation. They just slip right off the yeast and go to the surface, and so you don't really get foam. It's pretty crazy.
Does
but I'll
anybody
tell you what,
Oh, I was going to ask. So I work in a lab where when we ferment things, we sometimes use a product, like an anti-foam product.
Yeah, like
Is that common? Yeah.
Not in sake, no.
Okay.
Yeah, in beer they use some things to cut down on foam, but in Japan they just modify the yeast so that you don't get a lot of foam.
I've read that there's a device used in some places that's basically just a wire on a slow motor that just cuts through the foam.
So it is like a 2x4 high tech that goes across the top of the tank. Yeah, remember the top of the tank is just open, right? It's just a cylinder and the top's just open. So 2x4 that goes across, and then in the middle is mounted a motor. And then underneath that is literally like a spindle with 2 wires that go to each side, and it whips around like a huge propeller and breaks the foam up as it forms. The problem with the foam is you now have to allot X amount of tank space to account for foam. So if you're using a foamless yeast, you can actually produce more sake per tank because you don't have to give up, you know, I don't know, 10% or 15% of the tank just to account for the foam.
Yeah, it's like perpetual Krausen, basically. That's just
yeah.
And it's also, there's an infection risk, right? Because it also, like, it'll stick to the side of the tank, and it's a place for crap to live. And
yeah, you got to clean it off all the time. And then how do you clean it off? You know, you don't want to add a ton of water to the sake. You know, although some brewers that I've studied at, they reserve some of the water in the brewing process just for that purpose. So they will reserve, you know, a certain amount of liters of water, and then you can take a ladle and some of that water and clean off the edges of the tank as it ferments. Yeah.
Have you ever done a natural ferment? Have you ever done a natural ferment for sake?
I've never done it because I don't like wasting money. But there are some awesome breweries that do it. Tamagawa, I would say, is like the #1 brewery in Japan for doing that, and the head brewer is the first ever non-Japanese head brewer.
He just goes with whatever lives in the building already.
Yeah, they have a super old brewery. It's like wooden beams, and part of the brewery has dirt walls, and they make some weird sakes, man. They're super good, but they're really weird. And so the Philip Harper, who's the head brewer, is from England, but yeah, he makes some weird sakes, man. Wild ferment and aged, like 10-year-old sakes and 5-year-old sakes and stuff. Pretty crazy. You can have some of his stuff at the Joy of Sake in Manhattan.
Is there a word for when they do the natural ferment that we can look for on bottles, or is it just so weird that we'll never?
Yeah, you're not going to get any here.
All right.
Yeah, there's no, you're not going to, I mean, it's hard to find in Japan. There's no way.
All right, well, now we definitely have to road trip to Manhattan.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Joy of Sake is the way to go. Yeah. So you probably do want to try the 2 sort of funkier styles where you make your own lactic acid. And so those are called Yamahai, which is Yamahai, and Kimoto, which is Kimoto. Those, you can find those around Boston. Oh, when I sent Doug to Dion's, they have one Kimoto style. It's the cup that's footed, and it's got like flowers on it.
Oh yeah, I think did it say it was made from strawberry yeast?
Oh no, that's not footed. No.
Okay.
No, that's got like a city scene around it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh man, I have a love-hate relationship with that sake. Well, I have a love relationship with sake because it's delicious. So it's a brewery that only uses flower yeast, so yeast that they've cultured from flowers around their environment. So strawberry yeast, they have a sunflower yeast, they have a couple other ones. However, salespeople who are not brewers tell people that the yeast comes from strawberry plants so that it has like strawberry character. And you can really taste the strawberries, or you can taste like the oiliness of the sunflower. And the only reason you culture the yeast from the strawberries is because it was sticky, right? The yeast was just blowing through the air. There's not like osmosis where the yeast lands on the strawberry and then absorbs the character of the strawberry. It's pretty stupid. So, but they like to tell people that.
On the topic of yeasts, for us domestic folks, 7 and 9 from, White Labs and Y yeast are our main choices. Are there other places to get more choices domestically?
Nope.
Okay.
But only use 9.
Okay.
So White Labs number 9 is really good. It's like watermelon bubblegum.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7 from White Labs and Y yeast has drifted pretty far away from number 7. It's kind of gross. It's like, I don't know,
Wow.
like mesquite smoked Band-Aids, if you like that kind of thing.
No.
Some 4-vinyl guacanol thrown in there for the hell of it. But yeah, number 9 from White Labs is awesome.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's what you want to use. And
7 is kind of all the rage, but
Is that your favorite?
What's all the rage?
7 I thought was like the most neutral.
No.
I think it's the most of a workhorse. So like commercially, it's viable. So I think that's why it's most used. But I think that's the trade-off.
I mean, 9 nowadays, we're in 2020. 9's probably the top of the heap as far as how many breweries use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
7 in Japan was developed in central Japan, and like a clean number 7 is pretty nice. But the stuff that you get in America has drifted very far away.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. And number 10?
I mean, I've never had number 10.
Okay.
I get my yeast from a private yeast house. Well, there are 2 things. I have private yeast strains housed at White Labs. And then the other thing is I get my yeast from a lab in northern Japan. And they don't use the normal numbering system that the Japanese Brewers Association does.
Okay.
So I use White Labs number 9. And then I have 8 yeast or so that are housed at White Labs that I brought back myself from Japan. So, but commercially in the U.S., number 9 is probably the best thing and the most used. In Japan, number 9 is probably the top of the heap as far as how many people use it. Number 7 is right below that. And then all the super modern yeast, 1601, 1801, there's we're now into the high 20s. Those are all, you got to be a member of the Japanese Brewing Association to get them. And they only sell tiny little ampules of it. Yeast doesn't work like it does here. There are no yeast companies. There are very few yeast companies in Japan. So to get sake brewing yeast, you have to be a member of the Brewers Association, and you get it directly from them. And they only sell little glass ampules. And then you have to grow that up in-house because they're banking on everybody growing a yeast starter as part of the process. So I told you about the old school yeast starter, which takes a month. A modern one is 10 to 14 days. So
what is the medium for a sake yeast starter? What's the medium for a sake yeast starter? What are you growing it in?
Right, it's the same thing you're growing sake. It's just rice and water and koji. Yep.
Okay.
So the koji is a spore that you buy from a company, and then you inoculate that on 20 to 25% of your rice bill and grow it in a very controlled setting on your rice. And then when that's done, you add koji rice, let's say 20% koji rice, and then 80% steamed rice. And the koji rice produces enough enzymes to convert the other 80% of rice into sugar.
Where do you get the koji?
I get it from a lab in Japan, but you can buy it online.
Okay.
I got the spores.
Huh?
They're not expensive. Hang on.
Well, so here's the thing. You guys, unless you're going to get really into it, you can just buy koji that's already grown on rice.
Yeah, I got the Reliable Market sells it in the fridge.
They do?
Yeah, the Mountain something.
So there's a company in California called GEM Cultures, Jem Cultures. They will sell you koji. Wait.
This is the spores I got from Vision.
Oh,
Brewing.
you get that like kit or whatever?
Yeah, I got the kit. So that was the cheapest place I could find to get the spores. But that whole process of building up the koji and everything else, I thought, you know what? I'm kind of curious if I just went to Smart or something and just got koji, koji rice from them, how that would fare.
So I would probably go to F.H. Steinbart.
Oh, okay, I know that place. Yeah.
That's the only place you can buy it, as far as I know.
Okay.
Is that any good?
So they sell koji, which is already grown on rice. At least they used to.
So where'd you get that one from? The rice koji. Cold
Oh
Mountain?
yeah, Cold Mountain. Yeah, that's pretty good for making like food.
Food.
Yeah,
Okay.
and stuff. It's not gonna make the best sake.
Okay, that's good to know.
But you can buy that like Whole Foods or a health food store or whatever.
Yeah, Reliable Market sells it.
Here's the thing: you can definitely make alcohol with that. So that and sushi rice from Reliable and number 9 yeast, you could make like a pretty drinkable sake from that.
Well,
Are there
That's sort of what I ended up with, a pretty drinkable sake. Although it's going to turn into a Hanjozo because the amount of amelioration I've got to do to it to get it into whack is going to dilute it.
Yeah, but
Right, it's a Hanjozo now.
what yeast did you use?
I use 7.
Yeah. From Y yeast or White Labs?
White Labs.
Yeah. So it's kind of funky, right? Like a little.
Yeah, it came out first like way too sweet, and I don't know if I messed up, if I didn't get my starter built up enough before I started, or if I didn't let it go long enough.
Yeah, flip that over, man. Yeah, that literally said. Oh yeah, Miyako Koji. Yeah, that's Koji.
better than the bucket?
Koji. I don't know. Flip it over.
What?
Backside?
Yeah, no, I flip it over. I said. Right. Upside. There you go. Oh man. Yeah, upside down. Holy crap, that's hard to read. I don't know. Tell you the truth, I have no idea.
Amazon.
Try both, man.
Can't be good.
Yeah. Stuff like that's usually refrigerated.
Yeah. Well,
Buy it.
this one was refrigerated, but the other one just came in a box.
Cold Mountain's probably gonna be higher quality. Well, it's gonna have more enzymes.
Okay.
Because it's been refrigerated and whatever.
So the whole point of the koji is it's got the amylase in it, right?
Yeah. So when you mix the koji with water, the roots of the koji that are inside the rice grain from growing it activate and produce alpha amylase. They do produce protease and lipase in smaller amounts because that's the kind of koji we're using. There are other kinds of koji in Japan to make soy sauce or shochu, which is a distilled beverage. And those will produce more protease, which breaks down proteins, and lipase, which breaks down fats, than they will amylase because they're breaking down soybeans or sweet potatoes or whatever, But all the koji that you're going to find, like Cold Mountain and that Japanese stuff, is made with koji that's going to produce a lot of amylase. So you should be fine. And I'm telling you, number 9, White Labs number 9 is going to be what you're going to use. I think it's WLP 709, I believe is what it is.
Sake kojis, are there different strains that also have different characters in the final product?
Yeah, absolutely. I have access to, I don't know, 30 kinds of koji, probably. And Japanese brewers probably have access to like 50 or 60. And so there are kojis, that will produce more glucose. There are koji that produce more umami because they produce certain chemicals at certain times and stuff. So yeah, depends what you want. And then there are some that just have different growing cycles. During my 2 years of R&D, I tested 5 strains of koji. And then out of that, I chose one that I thought had the best flavor and worked the best in New England and made the best sake, but also grew the best, right? So some of them were like a little more persnickety in the growing process, which is 48 to 52 hours.
I'm guessing that it's not one that we would have access to.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no.
I guess a related question, you have access to a lot of different sake strains.
Mm-hmm.
Is there of yeast, are there certain ones that are really your favorite? You mentioned 9. That's a good workhorse. Maybe I'd compare that to US5. It's like common and available and easy to work with. But are there some that are really, really interesting, really characterful that you like to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I like the aroma yeast, the modern aroma yeast. So 1801 is the one that's in Dasai that gives you a lot of sort of anise and fennel and that kind of thing. I actually have 1601. I think I'm the only person outside Japan to have it, but it's a precursor to 1801. So it produces a lot of that same aroma, a little bit of like almost elderflower character in the aroma. And so I like to blend that with something like number 9 or whatever.
Do that as a co-pitch, or do you brew separate batches and then blend them after fermentation?
No, White Labs grows up on my yeast. So what they do is they grow both yeast and then they blend them before they ship it. So 50-50. Right now, 50-50 is what I have them do. But there are breweries that will do like as detailed as like 30-70 or whatever. I just do 50-50. So 50-50, number 9 and 1601, which is a pretty good. The sake you're drinking right now is 9 and 1801, so it's pretty close to the same thing. And then I have a yeast, which definitely no one outside Japan has, that I use for only nigori sake, so unfiltered sake, and it's a lot of fruit. It's just like fruit on top of fruit on top of fruit, and then it creates a little higher than normal acid. I was given the yeast by a brewery in Japan and then told not to tell anybody. Like that kind of.
Your secret's safe with us.
Yeah, it's fine. It's literally the official yeast of the neighboring prefecture. So it was one of those kind of things. It would be there is no example like this, but it would be like a brewer in Massachusetts gave you New Hampshire's official beer yeast. Right? It's that kind of thing. So every not every, but most prefectures in Japan have like official prefecture yeast strains and stuff. Because they're just breweries who've been around for so long, 800 years, 600 years. It's pretty common. Yeah. So one of my plans, definitely, after I get my brewery up and running, is in the spring. So Japanese breweries traditionally brew all winter long because it's a cold fermentation. So traditional breweries will brew only during the winter. And then they press all their sake during the spring, and then they age it for 6 months through the summer. This is like a lager story, basically.
In the caves,
like Germany and Austria and Czech Republic. And then in the fall, they launch these like newly they call them new sake, but they've been aged for 6 months and pasteurized in the bottle and everything. However, if you go to Japan in the spring, the breweries release fresh sake that's unpasteurized all the time, like all over Japan. And so my plan is to go to Japan during the spring and visit like 20 breweries that I like up and down Japan, the length of Japan, travel all around Japan, buy sake at these breweries and ship it to White Labs and have them culture the yeast.
Stuff you like the best, yeah.
Yeah, I would just go to the smaller the better, because the bigger guys are going to be using like official like sake brew, the Sake Brewing Association yeast. But there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yeast in Japan that are regional, that breweries don't let anybody else use and whatever. So yeah, I'm going to travel around Japan and go to these tiny breweries and just grab.
Don't they pasteurize though?
No, in the spring, not in the spring. In the spring, It's all about namazake, which is unpasteurized sake. So they would release that sake in small amounts in the spring.
Okay.
So you'd have to travel there and go to the brewery and like drink their fresh sake and then grab a bottle of something you like and leave, and then gather all these bottles together and ship them to White Labs. Yeah. And then they'll spin it down, culture it, and then keep them as private strains, under whatever number I give them. Yeah.
So is most of the Japanese industry doing sort of isolated single strain grown in culture by commercial or trade association sort of central labs and distributed? Are any of those smaller places you talked about just kind of maintaining a house culture by saving a little last batch and throwing it in the next one? And
Yeah, they don't do the save the last batch thing, but they don't crop their yeast like a brewery, like a beer brewery, because there's so much other crap in there. It's open fermentation. You've got koji going on in there.
That is a strange part. Yeah.
It would be hard to spin that down and isolate the yeast layer. However, there are breweries with small labs, and they're using private yeast strains and stuff that they've had in-house for hundreds of years. They just, make a whole bunch of slants, and keep them frozen. And they might have some stuff off-site, much like a brewery would do here. I used to work at the Boston Beer Company, and we had yeast at, half a dozen places in the U.S. Just because if a bomb hits Boston, we want to be able to make Boston Lager in the future, So White Labs has Boston Lager yeast, a bunch of other, breweries and lab houses and stuff. So yeah, you do the same thing. So, but yeah, that's why I would go to the smallest breweries I could, because a lot of them are just going to have local yeast. Some of them don't have a number or name or anything. They're just like, this is the yeast we use for whatever,
Pre-Pasteur, what was the traditional way of maintaining your yeast culture at a brewery?
Oh yeah, you got to understand that Japan's been pasteurizing sake almost 300 years before Louis Pasteur. It just didn't leave Japan. So Japanese people had pasteurization for centuries before Pasteur. So, but yeah, so before that, it was all the Yamaha type of sake. So you would do a 1 month yeast starter, and you would use wild yeast, whatever was in the brewery.
Okay. So sometime whenever the Japanese heard about single culture strains and those sort of Carlsberg methods for isolating strains.
Yeah, there must have, I don't know the actual date, but there must have been some time in history where they eventually were like, oh, we can slant this or crop it or dry it out or do something to try to preserve the yeast. A lot of brewers in history, including beer brewers and everything else, just had equipment that made good product, and they didn't really know why. So, there was always like a brewer's stick or a certain wooden tank or whatever. The brewer's stick, like the stir paddle, there's definitely stuff like that going back in the beer industry, going back, centuries and centuries, where they're like, if you use the magic stick, the beer comes out good. They just had no idea that there was just a piece of wood impregnated with yeast.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, is I've been watching lots of
also
podcasts. So
yeah, pre-20th century, you got to remember that everything in Japan was wood. So they used a sugi wood, which is a traditional wood, and all the tanks were wood. And it was open fermentation. So I'm sure most of the breweries had no problem fermenting. Because you're using like a 2,000 liter wooden tank. So you stick rice and koji and water in there, and boom, we're off to the races. Just like a tank here, like a foeder, like an oak foeder or something like that, is like super saturated with microflora. So you stick wort in there, and you don't have to wait very long.
Pete, do you have a magic stick up at Backbeat?
No.
No magic stick?
No magic stick.
Yeah.
Small stainless.
Yeah, good move. But yeah, there's stories like that going back, long time, where people just had wooden implements, and they're like, they would pass it down from brewer to brewer. If you use this thing or use this certain barrels and stuff like that, they just didn't understand that it was microorganisms, obviously.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know we've eaten up a lot of your time. I don't want this to go on forever, but I do have a question about water. And again, just to get locally, you've worked with Massachusetts water. We all struggle with our own regional water. For mine, I used RO and added stuff to it. But what suggestions do you have for dealing with water around here?
Yeah, the biggest thing is you want to remove all the iron. So, I was a commercial brewer of sake, so we just strip everything out, reverse osmosis, charcoal, and then add back whatever we want.
Okay.
And so I would use gypsum, Massachusetts harvested sea salt, monopotassium phosphate, and Epsom salt to add. Good brewing water in Japan is rich in organic salts, and so magnesium, potassium, sodium, manganese, stuff like that. And so that makes like good sake. It's healthy for the yeast, but just no iron. You can't have any iron in there. It really makes the sake off-colored and off-flavored. So the easiest way to do it is just filter your water and add whatever you want.
Yeah, that's why I have a small RO kit and just pulled off what I needed from that.
I mean, that's what
I guess the potassium is the one thing that we don't normally have in our kit as beer brewers. You know, the salt substitute seemed to be the easiest way to get.
Yeah, monopotassium phosphate.
Right. Yeah.
I bought it on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And Epsom salt's the same way. Magnesium sulfate. I just buy it at CVS.
Yeah.
It's like high-tech brewing shit, you know. And then I was using sea salt for sodium, and I just ended up meeting these people at Atlantic Salt Company, and so it was Massachusetts Harvested Sea Salt, which I thought was a cool. I mean, you got to remember, in a 700-liter tank, I was using 15 grams of salt.
Yeah. Didn't take much.
They gave me a pound of salt for free, and I was like, all right, I'll see you in 5 years.
If I like it.
They thought you were just giving you a taste.
Yeah. See you later. Well, I was trying to buy it, and then they listened to me, and they were like, oh, we'll just send you a pound of salt. Like, whatever. But I would like mention it on Instagram and stuff. You know, I got them some love. But yeah, so you generally want like almost like hard water with no iron.
Okay.
You got to remember, Japan is incredibly volcanic. So you've got, I don't know, 24 layers of soil. It's all sedimentary, where you've got ash and sand and lava rock and blah, blah, blah. It's very different than the granite heavy, you know, dirt, pine tree kind of thing we got going on here. So it's almost like a natural filter. And so they get kind of mineral-rich water that has no iron. So it's a pretty unique situation.
Nice.
Yeah. But
all right, thanks.
Best way for us to do it is just to filter your water or buy filtered water, and then, you know, add a little gypsum, little sea salt, whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of us are doing that already, you know, but just with totally different things in mind, and there's a couple unique requirements for sake.
Yeah, the minerals in sake water generally are just healthy for the yeast cells early on. And you know, much like every beer brewer on the planet adds zinc. They're, you know, very small amounts, but they add like a little bit of zinc to every fermentation. Unless you're in Germany, and then zinc isn't Reinheitsgebot. So every brewing kit in Germany has a zinc valve that all the wort runs through. Funny how that works. Can't add it. You can't add it. So yeah, the minerals are good for yeast health.
Okay.
But for really what they do is it's all about mouthfeel. So you get better mouthfeel with mineral water. And then softer water, you get higher acid levels and less mouthfeel. So like nigori, if you want unfiltered sake, I would use soft water because you get higher acid to cut all that sweetness and all that out. Yeah.
Cool.
How would you compare the mineral content of good sake water to good beer water? Like the spectrum is like soft water is a pilsner, and then like
it's harder. Well, soft water in Japan is like soft, like it's real soft. But yeah, it's hard water for sake is a little harder than beer water. It just has no iron, which is the weird thing. There's something about koji and rice fermentation that does not go well with iron. But
like
something like
really high mineral brewing water, like Burton or
Burton, it's like Burton levels, but no iron because of the unique geology of Japan.
Okay.
Yeah. And believe me, if you have iron in your water, it's a terrible. I did it once just to see what would happen. It's like it came out like super yellow,
bloody,
smelled bad,
tasting. Yeah.
It was not awesome. Yeah. Yeah, some of these things I don't, you know, some of these things I don't trust outright. You know, Japanese people are big on, we do it this way because we've always done it this way.
Mm.
You know? So some of these things I've actually tested. Just
Sounds like they've been spending time with the Germans.
yeah. Oh, it's very close to the same thing. Yeah. I spent a bunch of time with the people at Weinstefan, and I was just like, all right, dude, like, I get it. You know, you're just carrying on this tradition. There's not a lot of like innovation going on in Weinstefan, you know. Make awesome beer, but they make awesome beer because they just are doing what everybody else always did.
So thinking of innovation, and then also this kind of sprung to mind earlier when you were talking about how there's not a lot to kind of balance out different flavors. So what about adding things to sake, adding herbs, spices, fruit, hops, whatever?
Hops. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, dry hop sake is pretty good. You want to be real light-handed with it, but I've had some dry hop sake. I've had sake aged in bourbon barrels, which was pretty good. If I would do that, I would probably cover the bourbon barrel in like saran wrap or something, but like wrap it completely in shrink wrap. But yeah, I've had stuff where you could like, you know, there isn't a lot of that in Japan. There are herbs that they drink around New Year's that they steep in hot and warm sake to drink, and it's sort of a tradition around New Year's. But that's not anything you would see outside. I've only generally had it because in Japan, around New Year's, all the bottles, they make like neck hangers to go on them. And inside there's a little like plastic bag, and then inside that's like a tea bag full of these traditional herbs that you soak in warm sake, you know, so they kind of just throw it on every bottle. But that's not, you know, I think that's probably not something the average person does. But yeah, there's no, in Japan, there's not a lot of variation in that regard. There aren't a lot of people flavoring or herbing or hopping or whatever. But in the United States, there's people doing all kinds of weird shit. But I would say if you were going to start with something and you made like a clean filtered sake, hops are a good place to start. You know, something real modern, Simcoe, Citra, that kind of thing. And then just real light-handed, it comes out pretty nice. Brooklyn Kura makes one. The guys in there's two breweries in Brooklyn now, but the first brewery in Brooklyn Kura, they make a dry hop sake. It's pretty nice. They use Citra. It comes out kind of like fruit stripe gum. Like it kind of tastes like that. But yeah, but it's definitely possible. You can definitely, from a homebrew standpoint, you could do anything. I mean, you could, you know, a lot of fruit infusion certainly would be easy to do. You could do oak, and you could soak the oak in anything, right? Because we're homebrewers and a tiny little cup of oak chips. So, yeah, you could soak oak cubes and whatever you wanted to and flavor the sake. There's a cool brewery in San Francisco that does wine barrel sake that I never thought would be good, but it was really good. Yeah.
Should we get that Brooklyn Kura stuff around here, or is that just at the brewery?
Yeah, they have plans to sell in Boston, but right now, just, you know, Brooklyn area. They're a really small brewery, so they don't have a lot of distribution. Yeah, there's currently no sake brewery in New England. So when I build my brewery in New England, I'll be the only brewery between Brooklyn and Toronto.
Ooh.
Yeah, the Kira place. I don't really like their labels. I looked at their website today. I don't know what you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you go there, you kind of get their aesthetic, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of their label design.
Yeah.
It also has BK on it, which it's just like Burger King. I don't really. But yeah, Brooklyn Kura. Their sake is really good. They make a lot of the same kind of sake, so they don't make a wide range of sake. So all the sakes they have fit into this very small category of like drink it in a wine glass. It's all filtered and like they're kind of splitting hairs a little bit. I'd like to see them mix it up a little bit and do a nigori and do other stuff, but that's not their vibe. Yeah. And then there's a new brewery that opened kind of during the pandemic, I guess, which is super small. It's 300-liter tanks.
Okay.
Very small. And it's one guy in Brooklyn named Shinobu Kato. And so it's Kato Sake Works. I don't know if you ever get there, but there's also a brewery, a brew pub that I helped start in Delaware Water Gap, Pennsylvania. It's a 4-hour drive. It's about an hour and a half outside of Manhattan, in the Delaware Water Gap National Park. And he has a small brewery that we put in a restaurant. He's a chef who was running like a ramen izakaya kind of Japanese restaurant, and we built a brewery in there. So now he brews sake to go with his ramen.
Oh,
yeah,
nice. I grew up not too far from there, so that's.
Yeah, it's the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, so yeah.
Delaware Water Gap is.
Yeah.
Basically
a lot of New York expats, so I can kind of see why someone would set up a restaurant there. I know a lot of musicians who got tired of being in the New York scene, and then relocated out, so they're just close enough to drive to Manhattan if they had to, but otherwise.
Yeah, it's basically it's kind of like Western Mass, right? So it's like on the weekends, people from New Jersey and New York kind of drive out. If you go out 80, it's the first town over the Pennsylvania line, right? So people from New York and New Jersey go out there and like leaf peep and buy pies and all this other bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's also like the Appalachian Trail juts out right there. So they have a lot of hiker business. People get off the trail and go to his restaurant or his dad's place or whatever.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He grew up there. So his dad owns like a farm store pie bakery thing. Yeah. If I was hiking for weeks on end and I got off the AT, I'd eat a whole pie.
Yeah.
You know? A cannabis pie.
Dude, they like going up to like Thanksgiving, they sell like 1,000 pies a day for like the week leading up to Thanksgiving. It's crazy. It's this little like farm stand thing. It's weird. It's like the weirdest consulting job I've ever had. But nice people. And he's making pretty decent sake now, which is pretty cool. So
nice.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. So he was getting burnt out on the kitchen. Yeah.
So do you have your own polishing machine?
No. I buy milled rice. Oh, it's already milled. So I buy it grown in Arkansas, milled in Minneapolis.
He polishes it by hand, of course, one grain at a time. That's how you call it artisanal.
You don't want to break it.
If I wanted to buy a mill for my size thing, it's like $1 million.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and then people to run it, like $1 million, and then you need the building to put. You don't put it in the brewery; it has to go in another building, and then so it's in another building somewhere, and then people to run it. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it ultimately milling one at a time, or what's it doing?
No, it's like a cyclonic mill, so it's cylindrical. It's very tall, and so in the bottom of the mill, there's like an hourglass-shaped millstone that spins at a bajillion RPM, and then the rice comes down into the chamber and just kind of goes in the chamber, comes around, and goes back up. And so while it's in that little chamber, it gets just nicked. So the little rice of grain gets nicked and then gets vacuumed up to the top and just goes like that. So to get rice from, it comes out of the field, paddy rice is like 95% or something like that. So they've milled away 5%. To get it from 95 down to like 60, which is where I bought my rice, it takes like 2 days. And then to get from 60 down, it takes success. It's like an exponential scale. So when you get sake that's like Dasai 39, it took them 2 days to get to 60, but then it's probably another day and a half to get down to 39 or something like that. It just gets like slower and slower and slower because you don't want to create a lot of friction. You don't want to break the rice grains.
Right.
There's a lot of work that goes into that. So I use 60% rice.
In terms of bang for the buck, at least for like if we're thinking of clubbing together and getting some some of the stuff from the Yamada Nishiki from Minnesota or something like that.
Yep.
The premium from 70 to 60, is it worth it?
Oh yeah, for you guys, no.
Okay.
I would buy 70 or 75 Yamada Nishiki, whatever Blake's got at the mill, but 70 or 75 for you, it's not worth it.
Okay.
If you're making sake in a
our stuff is gonna suck regardless.
No. Look, if you used number 9 White Labs and Yamada Nishiki from Minnesota, and that Cold Mountain Koji, and you had like temperature control, dude, you can make like a totally serviceable sake. Yeah. Totally. You can make a good sake with that, without a doubt. You know? People who have all these like sake homebrewing horror stories are just, they're not good brewers. They just don't, they're like, oh, I think I just huck all this stuff in here and use champagne. I talked to somebody who made like bread yeast sake. And they were like, yeah, it wasn't very good. I was like, oh, shocker. You know? You know? You used like Fleischmann. You know?
Yeast, right? Hey.
Yeah, it's yeast, whatever. Man. That's what a lot of those kits come with, like champagne yeast and mead yeast and all kinds of other stuff.
Oh, sake kits?
Yeah, all those sake kits come with like mead yeast and champagne yeast and just dried shelf-stable yeast, because who knows how long those kits were going to go. So, yeah, if you get like Cold Mountain Koji and you get Yamada Nishiki rice and you use good water and you use number 9 White Labs, you'll make a good, fruity, drinkable sake without a doubt. It's not that hard, you know? You just got to keep it cold. And I can send you like the temperature schedule for the days and everything. And you got to be able to keep it cold. So I have a freezer downstairs with a temperature controller hooked up to it. That's all I use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think all of us have something like that.
Yeah, right? You need like a temp firm chamber or something like that. And so you got to be, and it gets pretty cold. Like 6.5 C is pretty cold in the beginning. And then you literally just like tweak it up half a degree a day, that kind of thing. You got to stir it occasionally because it's open fermentation. And then, you go up to maybe 12 and then ferment it like that for 4 or 5 days and then start slowly creeping it down. Yeah, it's not that hard.
Can you do it closed ferment if we're paranoid, or is open?
Sure. I usually take the lid of the bucket and just like rest it on top of the bucket.
Okay.
I've also done it where I snapped on the lid and put like a tube into a water thing to make like an airlock. You could do that too.
Okay.
You just got to take the lid off to stir it, right? But, you know, that size sake, you're going to stir it like every couple of days. You're not going to stir it all the time. So, little tiny bucket of sake, you're just, you're going to stir it maybe every 2-3 days. Yeah.
Yeah, I used a big mouth bubbler, so it was big enough for me to get in there and around, but still keep the cap on it. And
dude, if I was using that, I think I would just shake it.
Yeah. When I think on the third or fourth day, when I was kind of like tired of, at first it was really, really thick. Like I had a hard time getting it paddled through it, and so I kind of just gave it a little whirl. And the longer it went, the more digested, the easier it got to.
Yeah. So when they stir a tank of sake, so like the brewery I go to and work in is like 5,000 liter tanks. So when you can't stir them, right? You can't stir that much rice. Yeah. And so the first like week, the rice goes in and absorbs some of the water. The first like day or two, it's just rice. Like it doesn't really look like it. And then it starts slowly breaking down. And so the stir stick for sake is like a long pole and it's got a block on the end. And what you're doing is you're pushing that to the bottom and then pulling it straight out. And as the block comes out, it creates like a vacuum and stuff rushes in to fill the hole. So you're not really stirring it like a witch's cauldron. You're kind of pushing something down and pulling it up. Because it's just rice. It's like solid rice.
Yeah. It was like really thick rice pudding.
And I think as a home brewer,
you got to gruel.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother as a home brewer even, let it go for like 3 or 4 days until it starts to loosen up a little bit. I probably wouldn't even bother. Yeah.
What other stuff do we need, equipment-wise, to make sake? I'm thinking like a
water
filter, any other stuff?
A what?
Like, how do you filter it at the end?
Yeah, so you're going to need lactic acid. So 88% food grade lactic acid. It's like a liquid lactic acid. You could buy it online here. Don't use citric acid or any other kind of acid. Lactic is what you want to use. And then at the end, you have to filter out basically oatmeal. So the best way to do that is to or I guess not pump, but scoop the sake out into bags of some sort, like a mesh bag, and then put those into a container that you can press. There's actually a pretty good video online on bostonsake.com, which is my website. I created a homebrew press to make R&D sake in the brewery, and then almost everyone in the U.S. has made one of those presses. So they started calling it the Bellomy press. And so it's just a bunch of plastic tubs, and like one tub fits inside the other, and I drilled a bunch of holes in it.
Not worried about oxygen during this point?
No, the sake is fermenting when you put it in there, so the whole tub fills up with CO2 almost instantaneously. And so you don't have to worry about oxygen. So
Doug sent me that video, and actually that's basically what I ended up after thinking that my brew bag, a 200 micron brew bag, would strain it out, and it just didn't. I ended up just putting that in one of my larger buckets, and then put a smaller bucket inside.
Yeah.
And started putting it in water until it finally started squeezing some
you have to press it.
I just got a 400 micron brew bag, and I think that's going to do a better job, because the leaves themselves make the filter. I don't need a real fine filter, I don't think. And then it's wrapping and gravity.
I use 100 micron bags.
What's that?
100 micron.
Really?
Well, so 400 micron, you're just going to get like pieces of stuff in there. You're going to have to drop that out at some point. So even 100 micron, I have to do that. So 100 micron bags, the sake comes out white.
Yeah.
And like real light white, but still white. And then I put it in you put it in something and add some bentonite or whatever fining agent you want to add.
That's what I use, bentonite, yeah.
Yeah, and so bentonite, mix it up really, really well, and then put it in the fridge. It'll just drop out. It'll look crystal clear. It won't be crystal clear. It'll look clear. And then if you want to get super nerdy, you would pump off the top of that bentonite sediment layer and filter that with a filter. Yeah, like a super jet or whatever that thing's called.
Yeah, I used the bentonite and then just racked off the top bit. And even then, when I bottled it after that, there was still a little bit of sediment left that kept coming out. And I think maybe I could have done one more, just vessel to vessel.
After fining, unless you have an actual filter, you're not going to be able to get it complete.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't feel that bad.
Yeah. Well, we need a filter.
Activated carbon filter, pretty much, or?
No, like a wine filter, like a plate and frame filter.
Oh, okay.
Like a...
How many microns?
Buonvino. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Vivino, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, one of those? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I used. I used the Superjet, which I doubt any of you are going to have, but it's like $400. But they make a lower version. Oh, they make the Mini Jet.
Ooh, okay.
Mini Jet, I don't know how much it is. 100 and something, $125, something like that. I don't know. They make a smaller one called the Mini Jet. Okay.
We'll get the club to buy it.
Huh?
We'll get the club to buy it, right?
Oh, if the club was buying it, I would buy the Super Jet. Well, because then you could all bring your sake and just run one right after the other. Yeah. Super Jet does like, it'll do like 50 gallons per filter set.
Okay.
But yeah, if you go on and look at like homebrew wine filters, Wine and More, one of those sites, they'll have there's literally one company that makes all these like smaller filter things. It's just a plate and frame filter. So you'll drop it out bentonite and then you'll pump it, the filter will pump it off the sediment through the filter sheets, and then you'll get crystal clear sake.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Easy.
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Look at that. That's that plastic 1 cup.
Yeah, fuck, you could tell.
I saw it earlier. Eiko Fuji. Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna grab one of mine then.
Yeah, it looks like a 1 cup, and when you go to grab it, you find out it's plastic.
Yeah, it's squeezy.
Yeah. Yeah. Where'd you buy that? Gordon's?
No.
Where?
I told you. You saw the picture.
Reliable?
Well, the rest of us don't know.
No, they don't have that.
Well, actually, you're seeing
Gordon's
coming out of
not
terrible, but then you can see the bottom.
Dion's.
Wait, hold on. They don't have the plastic 1 cup at Dion's, do they?
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna get in trouble.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
That's not a Todd approved sake. No way.
They're slipping.
That doesn't
Yeah,
belong.
I told you I bought one of each.
That doesn't belong in their shelf set.
Uh-oh.
No way. That's not a high. That's not anywhere near something like this. You know. Sales girl must have been hot. Yep.
The ladies are buying on the side, I guess.
Ladies,
Uh-oh.
don't blame it on the girls.
Well, they own the place.
No. Somebody, some guy or Matt maybe or somebody. Whatever. They get people coming in there because they move so much weight. Like they move so much sake. They get people who come in there and they're like, you gotta buy this thing, you gotta buy these bigger bottles. And I'm like, nope. Don't buy big bottles, buy everything this size.
Mhm.
You know, you make way more money. So they get people coming in because the distributors are like, oh my God, you gotta go to the store. They're moving like a ton of sake. They're moving like cases and cases of 1 cups a week. And they're like, you gotta go in there. So they get salespeople who stop in.
Ah,
And
true.
they're like, you gotta buy these like 720s. And they're like, nope. Just gotta buy 1 cups, man. That's it. I've drawn a line in the sand. Mark, was that your sake?
Oh yeah, so that was just so that's I mean there's a little condensation on there kind of clear, but it's not terrible. And you
Yeah,
can
so it
see,
looks clear, but when you
Mhm.
drink it, there's definitely like a little chalkiness or whatever.
yeah. I mean it's it needs some work, but you know, hey, it turned out as sake, and I got about 1.5 gallons out of, you know, several months of labor. So I'm all right, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Who doesn't want to invest?
Right. So the question about steaming the rice, when you're doing your experimental batches,
Yeah.
that was the main labor thing for me, was steaming, because it's not like rice cooker. This is like literally cooking the rice with steam. You
Right.
know, so you know, I had the bamboo whatsits. I mean, what are you doing to make large enough volumes to do experimental batches that would be sort of on the homebrew scale?
Yeah, so
I did my
generally,
third edition. I had to do 2 full stacks of the things. You know,
yeah, I wouldn't do that. Instead, I would take your giant propane-fired kettle,
Mhm.
and I would take a piece of cloth, like a bed sheet, let's say, and ratchet strap it to the top of the kettle. So you would put 4 or 5 gallons of water in the bottom of the kettle, and then you would ratchet strap some cloth in the top and fill that with rice that you
Oh,
washed and soaked.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Oh
then,
shit, that would, oh my god, because that's what killed like hours and hours of time in the kitchen, steaming batch after batch to get enough to make this stuff. And I thought, oh, if I want to scale this up to 5 gallons, holy crap, how long am I going to be here?
yeah.
Okay,
So
that's a game changer right there.
Yeah, you would take. I can send you pictures.
So you
Okay.
just drop it in. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could, I mean, we steam. Right now, I've got the guy in New Orleans steaming 25 kilos at once.
Holy shit.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Using a bed sheet, basically. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Love it.
Yep. Pretty awesome.
We're looking at 9:30. We've been here a couple of hours now. I don't want to
put my kid to bed, but my kid's a super Star Wars nerd, and she's looking at your Captain Picard thing behind her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Jean-Luc, yo.
Yep. Well, this is my office now, so he keeps intimidating the masses to
Nice.
everybody in line.
Yeah.
We fuck around. I tell him to make it so.
We showed her Next Generation first because it's kind of the most age appropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not quite 10.
Mm-hmm.
So Next Gen, and then we went Voyager
Okay.
because Deep Space isn't really for 9-year-olds. And then we tried to watch the original series, but she didn't really like it. It's a little too old and weird.
Yeah, I can see it not being relatable. Yeah.
You know, I haven't watched it in a long time. There's a lot of times where like Captain Kirk goes in the turbo lift and then comes out wearing a different shirt.
Oh yeah.
Like,
It was
there's a
floppy.
lot of, like, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Where people like there's totally like just like flaws in filming.
Oh sure, it
There's
was
lots of
shoestring stuff at the
misogyny.
time. They were on the verge of being canceled almost every season.
Yeah.
It's amazing that then after all this time, it's like it became so seminal. But
Yeah.
at
And
the
then
time,
recently,
it was total shoestring.
and then recently we started watching Enterprise with
Oh okay.
Scott Bakula.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay, Mr. Todd. Thank you so
Anyway,
much.
Thanks a whole bunch. This has been great. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. You guys can just contact me whenever you want about homebrew and sake. And
Will do.
kind of streamline some of your process.
Careful what you let.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't mind. But we can streamline some of the processes to make them a little more homebrew friendly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and reciprocally, we'll do what we can to kind of help make New England more sake receptive and friendly for getting like yours up and running.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, whenever this whole situation kind of resolves itself, we'll be definitely starting a brewery of some size. I have no idea. So it depends how much money I have access to, but we'll definitely be starting a brewery.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Good luck.
All right.
I'll talk to all you guys soon.
All right, Todd.